Good morning, documentary lovers or just fans of things that are free. I'm Tom Powers, as he said. I have been coming to this festival for 12 years. In the rest of my life, I program the documentary films for the Toronto Film Festival that takes place in September. We'll be announcing our documentary selection on Tuesday. And I also run, with my wife, a festival in New York City, the largest documentary festival in the country, called Doc NYC. That happens in November. And I host a podcast about documentary film called Pure Nonfiction. I have buttons here if you want one later. Each Thursday we release episodes where I interview documentary filmmakers. Although today's episode I interviewed the Detroit playwright Dominique Morisseau. So any Detroit fans or people from the Detroit area like me, take a listen to that, Pure Nonfiction. Today we've got the directors and producers of 5 documentaries who are at the festival. Very different films, each one of them. And in this conversation, I'm going to ask some questions about how they got into the documentary world in the first place, some of the challenges they faced on these projects, and what are some of the rewards of documentary making for them. And at some point, we'll make this conversation more interactive. So if you have questions, please save them up, and I'll turn to the audience later. So I'm going to get this started by, I'm just going to go down the row and ask each team of filmmakers to give a short description of their film that's here at the festival. So to my left is Neil Berkeley. His film is called Gilbert, about the comedian Gilbert Gottfried. It has a screening today at 6 o'clock and another screening tomorrow at noon. Neil, can you tell us briefly what Gilbert is about?
It's about Gilbert Gottfried. If you're
Hey, we're done. Moving on.
Yeah. It's the comic Gilbert Gottfried. If you've seen Aladdin or Problem Child, or you're a fan of stand-up, or you grew up in the 80s like me, you know who Gilbert is. The reveal that you'll find out is that he's not that loud, vulgar guy you see all the time. He's actually a very sweet, charming family man.
Can you do a Gilbert impression?
No. I've seen too many people do that to his face to know that you shouldn't ever do that. It never works out.
All right, so we'll come back to you. Next to Neil is Anna Choi and Nari Kai. Their film is called Wasted. It features Anthony Bourdain. And Anna and Nari, can you tell us a little bit about this film? It's going to be playing today at 3 o'clock with a special guest, Mario Batali, in person. So Anna and Nari, tell us a little bit about Wasted.
So I think we were both attracted to this project because it's one of the biggest problems that no one knows about. So in this country alone, we waste almost half the food that we produce, which is completely edible. And there are almost 1 billion people starving in this world, and we're harming the environment, and we're wasting money. There's so many bad things about wasting food. So we decided that we wanted to tackle this problem and inform people, but not in a doom and gloom kind of way. We wanted to show people that you can walk away from the theater feeling inspired and do impactful things in your daily life. So we work with a lot of chefs like Anthony Bourdain and Mario Batali. So we enlisted some creative thinkers and people who are very passionate about eliminating food waste and tell their stories and just inspire people to make a change, because it's something that every single person can do is stop wasting food.
Yeah, I mean, Nari and I have worked with 0.0 for the last almost 10 years, or probably more than 10 years. But I've worked with a lot of chefs all around the world, restaurants, purveyors, farmers, etc. And they work really hard, and they care about what they make. And as you know now, it's a pretty big foodie culture in terms of Chef's Table, and there's a whole network where you have programming 24 hours a day. And we realized that there was more that we could do with that sort of obsession in terms of food waste. Again, it's a lot that happens here in the US can affect the rest of the world. And so we started investigating this problem and researching it, and people have been working on this problem for a while. And so there are a lot of interesting solutions that are already in place all around the world, from very simple things to, again, chefs who have this huge culinary background and historical background in terms of techniques and cuisine. But it was really fun. We watched a lot of environmental, and people were like, this is an environmental documentary. We're like, oh, okay, cool. And we watched a lot of them, and some of them are just like, horribly depressing. You leave at the end of it, and you're just like, I don't know. It's just sort of like the storm clouds hanging over your head. And again, that was exciting about this topic, is that there are a lot of things that are fun and like delicious and easy to do. And so we were like, can we make a fun environmental movie? And that was kind of the challenge. It's like basically taking all these, super talented chefs and businessmen and environmentalists and seeing if we could sort of, get a couple laughs out of it too.
So you two have been working with Anthony Bourdain for over 10 years. Who does the better Anthony Bourdain impression?
Yeah, don't do that either. I mean, Tony doesn't really have. It's not as as like Gilbert, So he's just.
So you can do a Gilbert Gottfried impression?
No.
All right. Moving on. Next to Nari is John Olszewski. His film Quest played yesterday, and it's going to have another screening today at noon. Did anyone see Quest yesterday? All right. Jonathan, this is your first documentary, I should say. You worked on it for 10 years. Can you tell us what Quest is about?
Yeah, so Quest is a sort of a portrait of an American family. I spent over 10 years filming with the family, the Rainey family in North Philadelphia, as they work jobs, they're raising their kids, and they run a hip-hop studio out of their house. And I think the film is just an attempt to reveal a neighborhood, in all of its complexity, when sort of the mainstream media chooses just to sort of define a place by sort of its obstacles, and really just want to reflect this beautiful community and hope to build bridges and build community through storytelling.
Thank you. So any of you who want to run out after this panel, go check out Quest at noon. I moderated the Q&A for it yesterday. I thought my mission was not to cry. Mission failed. So Amir Bar-Lev is sitting next to Jonathan. You lovers of free stuff. Your next most value for money proposition at this festival is to buy a ticket for Amir's film because it's 4 hours long.
It's free 2 hours.
Amir has made several films before, including My Kid Could Paint That and The Tillman Story. Amir, tell us about Long Strange Trip.
It's a documentary on the Grateful Dead, and as Tom pointed out, there's a free 2 hours. You pay for the first two, you get the next two free. So, yeah.
Do you want to say anything more about the film? This film is, it's the Grateful Dead. Okay, yeah. Can you do your Jerry Garcia impression?
Sure, I can do Jerry pretty well, I think. I need some glasses.
All right, you took the bait.
Right.
At the end, Anakin, pronounce your last name for me, Anakin? Huel. And Andrew Grant, the team behind the film Cause of Death Unknown. It's going to be playing on Saturday at noon. Anakin, can you tell us about this film?
Yeah, this film started in 2005 as my sister died suddenly. She was a mental health patient, and the cause of her death was unknown. So that prompted me to start an investigation into what could have caused her sudden death, and it led me into an investigation of the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatric medication. So it's like a global investigation into how the pharmaceutical industry has put very unsafe medicines to the market, and also how they have created diagnosis and made human conditions become diseases, and how they have made money on that.
And Anakin, you come from Norway?
Yeah.
And your producer, Andrew, is New York-based. Am I right, Andrew?
I was. I've been in Berlin for the last 7 years, working on this film, actually, with Anakin.
Oh, terrific. So what I want to begin this conversation by asking is how each of you got into documentary filmmaking. What was the, switch that got flipped to horrify your parents that made you think, I want to spend my time making documentary films. Neil, let me start with you.
Yeah, I sort of faked my way into it. I think a lot of people did. My first movie is about a guy named Wayne White. It's called Beauty's Embarrassing, and Wayne made Pee-wee's Playhouse and Beekman's World, and I knew him. He was a friend of mine, and I became very fascinated with him. And I have a day job. I run a design company and production company. We do, if you've seen the Property Brothers or Top Chef or all the Housewives, you've seen our work. So I was getting very bored by that. So I bought this little Canon Vixia camcorder and just told Wayne, I said, I'm going to follow you around and we're going to make a movie about your life. And he said he would get up every day and he'd go to his wife and say, Neil's going to come over and we're going to pretend like we're making a documentary for a little while, so I'll be downstairs. And I did that for a year and a half. And at first it was just going to be a short film showing off his work. And the more I got to know him, the more I got to talk to people and was inspired by him, I thought, I think this is a feature. And I just kept going and kept going. It was something that it became a story that I had to tell. And I think that's why most of us are up here. We latch on to these stories and eventually it becomes an obsession. And you just have to tell the world about this thing you know about.
Anna, what was your pull into documentary?
I don't know what it is, but there's something about me that whether I'm like on a plane or on like people always talk to me and just tell me things. So things that they shouldn't, like on first dates or whatever. And so I think it's like even when I've always loved stories and movies and art and you know, I would have my parents read books to me, and I feel like a lot of the stories that I was hearing from just normal people that I would kind of encounter were way better than, like, you know, when I was trying to write stories or when I was trying to. And I just realized there's just a wealth of people out there. They all have an interesting story, whether they know it or not. And so, I don't know, for me that started gravitating towards documentary opposed to, like, you know, narrative and fiction. So when I was in college, actually, I went to study architecture, and serendipitously, the department kind of folded, or some people retired, and someone went on sabbatical. And so in terms of the visual arts, I was like, well, I have to fulfill the photo photography component. And so I took introduction to documentary filmmaking, and then sort of it went from there.
Nari?
So ever since I was in 4th grade, I really wanted to become the next Connie Chung. I really was focused. I was like, get me, you know, voice lessons, braces. I was like, Mom, Dad, this is my goal. I have to do this. So I really was interested in becoming an on-camera reporter of some sort. And I realized once I got into college that I didn't want to be on camera. I wanted to turn it around and tell these other people's stories. But and what's great about documentaries is it's not like news where everything, you know, churns out so quickly and it's here 1 minute and it's gone the next. It's something that you can really sink into and really get to know. So, you know, like 10 years that you spent with that family, and, you know, we did ours very quickly, but working with these chefs and just being inspired by them, you really want to tell these stories in a deeper and more enriching way, and really have an impact and tell people about things that you think that they should know. And I think that's the big thing. It's whether it's, you know, your own story or other people's story, these are all stories that need to be told. And I think that's what, you know, documentary filmmakers do.
Jonathan, I know you started out as a still photographer, right? What made you move into moving images?
Yeah, so so documentary sort of came late. Even before the still photo, I was doing video stuff, making just silly videos with my friends, basically just filming ourselves doing bad things and then showing off, you know, and that led to like skate videos and, you know, all this of setting things on fire, fake blood, my tooth is chipped. I got a little story about that. But one thing about that process is creating art with your friends really bonds you together in this amazing way. And I think I have this like deep desire for connection. And it wasn't until later on I realized that doing art with people is a way to kind of build bridges and connect. And so with Quest, you know, at that point I had no interest when I first met the family in doing documentary, but I was doing still photo, and we were doing this like photo essay. And a year and a half into the photo essay, I just realized that this family, you know, still photo isn't the proper medium to tell their story. I wanted to reflect their complexity, their points of view, and cinema was just a better way to do that. I had never made a documentary before, but they were like, okay, cool, let's do this short little project. This is 2007. It took me 10 years to figure out how to actually finish a documentary. But for me, yeah, it's about connection and just, it's a relationship before it's anything else. And I think that was really incredible. And now I've got these friends for life. They're here. Hopefully you guys can come and see the film at noon or whatever. But yeah, it's just been an amazing experience of connection. And now we want to take this thing that we've done, sort of with the filmmaking experience and then bring that out into the world and build bridges, opportunities for community, elsewhere.
So, Amir, as I said, you've done several feature-length documentary films. Was this something that you were always on a path to do, or did you start out doing something else and switch?
I started as an editor, but yeah, I mean, I got hooked. As Neil said, there was a particular story that I just felt had to be told. I went as an exchange student. I was living in Prague, and this was like 1992, 93. And I met an elderly guy there who had an incredible story. He lived in the States at this point, but he was involved in the school I was learning at. And he just regaled my friend and I with these fantastic stories of swashbuckling in the 30s and 40s in Prague. And I just thought, God, this would make a great film. He escaped from the Nazis, he seduced a nun, all these really amazing things. But then I had this really low moment where I said, okay, this is going to be my first film. So I took him out to kind of do a fundraising thing where he could tell his stories. And I had this depressing moment where I realized, like, all the stories that I had been totally enamored with were very rote to him. Like he told them exactly the same way. Now I'm 45, I realize I do the same thing. But when I was 28, I was like kind of embarrassed by this. And so then he left after this weekend of trying to raise money for this film, and I thought, I was wrong. There's no film there. This guy's just a sort of like he's got a shtick. But then I thought, all weekend long he'd been complaining about this friend of his. His friend had visited him and brought cheap wine. His friend and him were comparing their declining sexual prowess with one another. I thought, wait a minute, maybe if I bring the friend, who's also a Czech American, there's a film right there. So that was I realized there was a little hook into it, and I smashed the two films together, and made my first film.
It's the first time I've ever heard you tell that story.
Are you being facetious, Tom?
It's true.
Right. Okay, cool.
Anniken, this film of yours, Cause of Death Unknown, is this your first film, or have you made other films?
It's my first feature, but I made a few documentaries and shorts before.
And what set you on the path to making documentaries?
I started with fiction, and when I was at Film Academy, it was before the Iraq invasion in 2003. I was very upset about the situation, and I was writing a fiction screenplay about the problems with that war. And I decided it was very strange to make fiction about something that was happening, so I decided to travel to Iraq instead and make a documentary. So that was my first documentary, and being there, I was really faced with how the media image of that country was so vastly different than what the reality was on the ground. So that made me really understand how important documentary film is, because you can really see things in deeper connections than what we are faced with in the everyday mainstream media.
Andrew, what brought you into documentary film?
Yeah, it was kind of serendipity. I was, for years, I was a film critic in New York, then a film distributor. And when I was in Berlin, and I met Anniken, and she told me about this project, and we spent a long time sort of doing a lot of the research on it, and I saw just how vast the subject was, and obviously a lot of it was going to take place in the States. And I just thought it was really an important topic, and I thought, I really want to be part of this. I really want to help get this message out. So that's how it all started for me.
So, in the course of making a documentary film, it's a long process. We have the privilege here at the festival to see these films after a lot of the hard work is over, although maybe some of the hard work in helping it reach an audience is still ahead. It's a kind of nice bubble of in between those two places. But I want to ask each of you about the struggles of making your new film that's here at the festival. And I want to come at this by asking you, can you think of a moment in the course of this filmmaking where you were really at a crossroads, either in production or editing, or you didn't know if this film was going to be what you thought it was going to be when you started?
Yeah, but the whole process is difficult. The thing about documentaries, it sounds weird to say it, but there's no script. I mean, even if you know the story of the Grateful Dead, you're constantly discovering something and finding something new. So you don't know what's going to happen when you start working on these things. And my process, I just pick up a camera and start shooting. So I have no idea. So that process involves a lot of self-doubt and depression and fear. And I think everyone up here feels that, because a lot of scotch late at night telling your friends that this is the worst idea you've ever had and you shouldn't have moved to New York to make this movie.
It was Negronis for Wasted Team. But.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a big part of it. And in mine, I hope you go see it tonight. There is a moment where I learned something about Gilbert and his family. And I saw him have to behave in a way that I can't give it away, but it was this thing that revealed itself 6 months into my shooting, where it was 6 months of there's no third act in this movie. Nothing's going to happen to this guy on his hero's journey. There's no change or having learned. And then one day I found something out about the family, and I was like, okay. And I think that's what happens a lot of times, is there's that day where you're in the edit bay or you're shooting and you go, oh, that's it. That's how this movie works. And then it kind of flows from there. But they don't just appear on screen. It is a very complicated process. And I think we all have that moment where what we're supposed to do finally reveals itself.
Neil, let me ask you this, because you've made 3 feature-length documentaries, Beauty is Embarrassing, Harmontown, and now this Gilbert. Do you feel like you've learned things from each project that you bring to the next, or is it kind of a delusion that you've got this down and then the new film throws you a curveball?
No, I think you learn something in everything. You learn something along the way about the process. And I had to watch my first movie for something I had to deliver again, and I saw so many things that I would not do now. I mean, people really like that movie a lot, and I hear feedback about it all the time, but I see things and choices I made that I would not have made now. I think the problems are just as complicated, but you've got a few more tools in your bag to attack them with.
So Anna and Nari, I want to ask you a version of this question, because you two have produced a lot of material with Anthony Bourdain, TV series, and so there's a way in which that must have advantages. You know what the team is. You know his strengths as a personality. So I'm wondering on this project, Wasted. Did you have a crossroads moment? Was there something that was peculiar to this project?
It's so funny that you say that. You would think that having worked with people and for many years and I love working with Tony, and every time it's still somehow new and fresh, and new challenges arise. And, working with creatives, and they are artists, chefs in general are very, very artistic people, it's always something new. So I think different chefs...
They're like shorthand for saying they're a pain in the ass? Or?
They're creative, like all artists.
Chef means boss, right, in French?
Yeah, so they have a certain vision, and they have a lot of control in what they do. So working with us, where we're asking them to trust us and tell their stories and open up to us, it is very much going against what they're doing every single day in their lives. So it's very challenging. So, you'd get to a country and certain people would ask you, be like, why are you here? Why are you here right now? I'm like, to film with you. He's like, what? Why are you here now? So, of course, at the end of it, all of our journeys, I'm sure you are always learning things and form bonds that are very important. But those beginning moments and getting these people to open up and trust you is always a hard challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would add to that is that, some of these people have been filmed with a billion times. So from our standpoint, it was like, we want something different or special. One of the chefs we filmed with is a man named Massimo Bottura, who has been in the news a lot because he started this whole sort of new style of soup kitchen. So he launched one in Milan as part of the Milan Expo. He launched one in Rio as part of the Olympics, and so he's been in print and in videos, and there was a documentary that was made literally all about him the year before. So it's like, we wanted him to say something that was going to be special to our film, but also special about himself. Like I think chefs get used to talking about their work, and they thought about it because it's part of their story and part of the success of their restaurants or their food or critical acclaim, etc. And so for us, every time it's like, well, how do we make this different?
Is that when your team says, "Send in Anna"? People will tell her anything.
Well, sometimes, but it's like also it's like we filmed at this Greek yogurt factory in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and we get there and it's like, I don't know if anyone's familiar about how yogurt's made on mass production, but it's done in a lot of stainless steel equipment. So you're like, okay, so we've got a bunch of big stainless steel tanks and a bunch of big stainless steel pipes, some of which are colored and some of which are not, and it's like, how do you make this visual? Or like, how do you make this interesting? Like, there's a really good story, but you just can't just say it, And we'd get interviews with people, and they would tell us things in interesting ways, but you're like, okay, but now how do we make this special? And the added challenge, which I don't know if everyone knows, like having 10 years to make a film, or 7 years, or 2 years is like, for us, like sort of a luxury. We were working with the Rockefeller Foundation, and they have a global goal, which is one of the United Nations sustainability goals, that they want to have food waste by 2030. They've invested $130 million in it. And they wanted this, we made this film with their support. And they were like, this was greenlit in May, and they were like, we would like you to be in Sundance or in Tribeca.
Sundance is in like
tomorrow. Yeah.
We knew we weren't going to get Sundance, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
but still, it's a super aggressive, there was like a timeline before there was even a film. And so it was, and there was so much going around, like we were trying to like, do we film just in the United States? Do we film just with chefs? Do we include everyday people? And again, every time it's like, oh, we got all this stuff for the chef. And it's like, well, he's wearing a white coat and he's got a white tablecloth, and these people have just paid a lot of money for the food. It's like not super inclusive, And so it's like, then we have to go, okay, here's a store that's doing really good work, but like, it doesn't matter unless you have a family that's, paying, like benefiting from this new model of supermarket. So it's like, I spent 3 days at a supermarket in Dorchester, Boston, like trying to pick up families. We're like, hey, you shop here a lot? Like, how are you benefiting from this place? And we found a great family, but do you know what I mean? It's one of those things where like, I spent literally 3 days just hanging out in a grocery store from opening to closing, and every night Nari's like, anything? It's like, I don't know, like we might have to cancel the shoot. And she's like, you stay in Boston until you get a family. It's like, okay, Nari. So, I mean, again, it's in a weird way, like time was a huge stress, but also really helpful, because it's like we could still be filming. There's so many stories out there. There's actually a lot of work being done around the world, not even just in the US. And so it was exciting because you have all these options, but then at some point, in television, a lot of times it's like you have 8 days to go film an episode. So it's like at some point you have to have pencils down. And so I think that's a phrase that we used a lot in our shoots, where it's like, okay, it's been a 16-hour day. I know you're trying to get the sunset, but like, at some point it's diminished returns. So again, like knowing when the film is done, or knowing when you're done, or the subject is done, is kind of, I think, the eternal question that everyone asks. I think it's a creative question. I'm sure that's true of like if you're writing a novel or you're doing a radio story and all the same things. It's like, how much do we need, and like, is what we have good?
Well, that's a good segue to Jonathan, who clearly doesn't understand when it's time to put the pencils down.
Yeah, the luxury of Quest is having no budget, no distributors, no one to tell what to do, except my wife, who's like, are you really going to continue filming? For her, it was just like, I'm hanging out with my friends, really. But I think, with Quest, stories are powerful. It's how they help us understand ourselves, how we understand each other, and the stories that are told about North Philadelphia, tend to be sensationalized, reinforce negative racial stereotypes, and then sort of reinforce a sense of distance. And I came to know the community before I even knew the family, the Rainies, and just fell in love with the community and saw this beautiful, amazing community, and didn't think they should be defined by their obstacles, not by the violence, the addiction, the poverty, but sort of like the love that they have, for each other. And so when I met the Rainies, that was sort of the goal, to kind of create this quiet portrait, of this family. So it was like filming just like parents with their kids, taking their kids to school, breakfast, this like creative community that they've like fostered and created for their neighborhood. To really kind of fight against these other depictions. And then 6 years into filming, one of the main subjects in the film was shot by a stray bullet. And so all of a sudden this this idea of this sensationalized whatever, like now all of a sudden I'm here filming this material. The family actually asked me to be there to do that, because it's like they sort of felt like this is a big part of our lives. We want you to be here. But then sort of this crossroads is like, how do I maintain this quiet portrait and not have this kind of major moment kind of take over the film, and then have the family sort of be depicted by this sort of tragic thing that happens, as opposed to everything else we were working on. And so ultimately, as I was also trying to just learn how to finish a film, we ended up filming for another 3 years, after that. And so it's like, here's this moment, but you're not defined by that moment. You get to sort of see what happens after, and even in the depiction of those moments, really focusing on these like quiet moments that you don't see on the evening news. And so, but it was a devastating, moment for everybody, but also for the film, having to figure out how do we kind of treat this, material to kind of do what we want to do with the film, and not have just another film about like, oh, the hood is scary and it's hard to relate to, but maybe interesting to look at from a distance. And really, we worked really hard to make something different from that, and hopefully we succeeded.
So, Amir, with your film, you have unique sets of advantages and challenges. You're a big-time Grateful Dead fan. But the world is divided between big-time Grateful Dead fans and people who are not high. And I know that you wanted to make a film that could travel widely and be seen by not just that core group of freaks. So what were your challenges?
Yeah, well, I think, Jonathan, I agree with you about finding relationships that humanize something that has been barnacled over with a lot of mythology. And in our case, it wasn't a community. It was this band, and for me, it was Jerry Garcia, because he's an icon, and I was trying to find people who could strip away, peel the onion of Jerry Garcia and rehumanize him, make him interesting and complex. And we found, I try to do that with every film, and you look for somebody who's going to do that for you. And I found a woman who was his first girlfriend when she was a model and he was a beatnik in this early 60s. And he ruined her modeling career because they went to go see Breathless, and she said, "Oh, I'd love to have my hair like Gene Seberg," and so he cut it, and that was the last time she was ever with nail scissors. It was a terrible haircut. So she was the first deadhead, or the first person who Jerry Garcia ruined their career. But then they didn't see each other for 30 years, and in the intervening time, he became a international icon, and she went on to be a poet and a Buddhist, and they had these very divergent paths, but they met, they fell in love instantly, and in this very Dickensian way, she recorded an interview with him because the only way she could get near him and have some privacy was to be a journalist. So she recorded this tape that nobody had ever heard before, and it is like Charles Dickens. He's basically saying, I wish my life had been with you and not what it became. And he spills his guts out about, his misgivings about being Jerry Garcia. And when we heard that tape and met this woman, we knew that, had something really special and something that would be controversial and would rub a lot of people the wrong way. And I look to do that, and I especially like to rub the core audience, the core stoned audience that you're talking about, Tom, the wrong way. So and we did that. So yeah.
Annika and Andrew, your film has also been in production for a long time, and because the seed of this story is the death of your sister, I have to imagine that it's more personal than some of these other projects we're talking about, even though all these projects are personal. Talk about your journey in making this film and the crossroads you had to get through.
Yeah, it's a deeply personal film, and because it portrays my sister, and it also portrays kind of being the next of kin of somebody who is mentally ill. It was a really, really hard struggle to make the film work, both in telling this very personal story and also doing this very extremely complex investigation and revelation of a very, very complex topics that I wanted, regular people to be able to understand. So it was really difficult, and also getting the right people, which Andrew took a great part in, also doing this research.
I mean, access, of course, was very hard. When you tackle the pharmaceutical industry, obviously they're not really excited about talking to you, going to the FDA, things like that. We had a lot of doors shut in our face. But as Annika mentioned, I think the real struggle was this idea of wanting to make a film that was very personal from her, telling her sister's story, as well as being very informative and investigative about the industry, taking these very complex topics and trying to make them digestible, and really finding that, when you see the film, you'll see there are 4 editors on the film, and we went through quite a few years of editing, and pretty much with each editor, we kind of started from scratch again, really finding that balance of how to tell both stories sort of parallel that worked was a huge challenge. And, to be honest, in Europe, around pitches and talking to commissioning editors, a lot of people kept telling us, no, you can't do that. It won't work. You have to make either an investigative film or a personal film about your sister. And we never believed it. We said, no, we believe we can do it, and we think we have. But it was I mean, there's Anniken's been working on the film for 11 years, so obviously there's just an incredible amount of material, and having to cut things out was obviously very hard. I mean, there's enough material for maybe 2 or 3 other films, but yeah, in the end, I think we finally sort of tapped out with the 4th editor. We finally got it to where we needed to be. So.
And also the reactions from the audience is very, very powerful, and people tell me that it's because it's so personal, or it's not because it's so personal, because it's so moving and emotional, they can also much more take in this very complex investigation that is there.
Anna, you were mentioning this situation that you are constantly in as a documentary filmmaker of like having to get someone to tell their story, and I feel like a tool of documentary filmmaking is like being nosy and sometimes being pushy and putting a camera on people on the toughest things that people are going through, and I kind of want to throw this out to the whole panel about how any of you apply that technique, or have come to learn to hone that technique or adapt it for yourself. Like, how do you get those moments that are often moments where like someone feels like you should be putting down the camera and just giving that person a hug instead of zooming in for a close-up right now. Anyone care to reflect on that?
Well, so the way I work is I shoot most of my movies, and I use as very small a camera as possible. And eventually, if you're in a room with somebody long enough, they kind of forget that camera's there, and it becomes a conversation. But people that know me know that's how I work. And I do have family and friends say, God, it's so weird that you're just sitting there while this person's saying these things to you. Like, shouldn't you do something? You're just sitting there. And then they say, well, you have no feelings, no emotions, and that's just who you are. But no, I think a lot of it is just persistence and gaining that trust and sitting with these people long enough to, for me anyway, to where they kind of forget the camera's there and it becomes a conversation. And I think you feel that in the movies. But that trust and just sitting there. I always say that when you're shooting something, you're looking at what you're shooting through the viewfinder, but you're looking with this eye around what else is going on. And so that's when you point the camera over there and get that part of the story. So it's just always being aware and knowing what your story is and what you need, and sitting there and keeping that red light on and getting it.
At least for us, I would just say that I'm actually a horrible photographer. Like, I can't even take a picture with my iPhone. And so the way that we've worked is we always have, it's been a 2-camera shoot for most of the time. We have very talented director of photography, Jeremy Leach, great, like a bunch of different cinematographers that we worked with. So the benefit that I have is that and I don't want to look through the monitor. I'm there to sort of keep eye contact with the person that I'm talking to go after the same thing that Neil mentioned, which is that I'm here, I'm paying attention to everything you say. You know, we do have a list of questions that in theory we want them to answer, and it's not they have to do it in any particular order. It's just, you know, we want it to be a good conversation. And so in the same way that if, you know, I'm keeping eye contact with you, I'm watching everything that you're doing, the cameras can get, you know, the coverage in terms of the listening shots and the cutaways, and they can go for what the beautiful moments are. And I'm listening, and I'm paying attention to what that person's doing. And I think that's the same thing, is that you want to get a good conversation with them. Most people just want to be heard, you know, whether it's you have a platform and you're the #1 chef in the world, or you're a single mom living, you know, and struggling, working 2 jobs to like feed your family. So I think that's the one thing about documentary, is that it's not news. You know, there's nothing that we want to get out of these people, and then it's like, okay, camera's off, we can go. We're there to keep rolling for as long as we can, to like until we feel like, you know, as much as possible, everything's been said, or everything that they want to say has been said. And I think that even when we did interviews, it was one of those things where like, okay, here are a bunch of questions that we want to ask. Sometimes we're trying to connect scenes, or we're trying to speak to bigger themes. But always we were like, you know, is there anything else that you want to talk about? And oftentimes that's what we start with. It's like, you know, we have a bunch of questions. We're going to be here for a while, but like, why don't you talk about, tell me what you know, we need to know about this now. And again, that idea of being heard, being seen, I think that's becoming more rare in this world, where like you're on your phone, you're on your computer, you're in your car, you're not necessarily connecting with people. And I think what John was saying, the same thing, this is what it's all about. Like, you share a film, you share a story that you hope speaks to somebody else, whether it's in a humor level, an intellectual level, or emotional level. You try everything you can to get even one of those little moments, even if it's like you filmed for 2 hours. Like, one moment is a success, kind of, in our books.
So real quick, I will say it's interesting how many times I'll be shooting something really devastating, really, really sad, and people that aren't in movies will, like, you know, cry, and they'll go, "You got that right? That was good." Like, people know what's good, and when they open up like that, they kind of want to make sure you were rolling on that.
Yeah. I'm not going to do that again, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, especially with Quest, it's about a relationship. It's about this friendship, and I think us having a shared vision that we wanted to, you know, build, you know, community. We wanted to build bridges. We maybe this film.
When you say we, you mean you,
me and the
Rainies, and the film subjects,
the Rainies, and our subjects.
Rainey
Yes, you know, they're proud of who they are, and they've already built this community out of their house, and sort of the film is a way to extend that, and it may be like someone hearing their story. You know, could be helped by that, and so I think just that shared vision, you know, and then we're gonna be real too, and I think that. Also, just spending a ton of time, you know, 10 years, spending a lot of time. They would say I'd sort of became like furniture, you know, and just, you know, I was around, and, you know, and it was just me. So it wasn't like a whole, you know, film crew, and I was sleeping on the floor at times and different things, and just spending a lot of time. And then, yeah, and then you figure that out in the edit too, in terms of what's too vulnerable, what's, you know, and then what does an audience need, you know, to connect.
There is this scene in your film, and I don't want to give too much away, so I'll be vague about it, but where someone's going through a really tough time, and you see them, you see that person say, "I don't want to talk to, you know, anyone right now," but you're still in the room filming with that person.
Yeah. So I'll never forget this moment. So it's like this kind of major kind of coming home moment. The subject, you know, is just overwhelmed with like too much attention, and, you know, kind of leaves that public space in a more private space, and I kind of follow in, and then I'm just all of a sudden very aware of like, well, what is my impact in this moment? She just said like, I don't want anyone to be around me, and and so I just like put the camera down. It's like, hey, like, do you need me to get out of here too? And she's like, no, I know you, and it's just like, I'll never, forget that, is that even in this kind of moment that there was that buy-in from the subject that we're doing this thing together, and it was like, okay, all right, let's keep moving. And I think too that the subject has such an investment in it too. You need to get real moments in order to kind of tell a story in a powerful way. And I think that the subject is invested in that, and sort of my job to kind of get those moments. And then in the edit you figure that out, and you kind of take stock and decide, okay, this is too vulnerable, or this is actually exactly what the audience needs, because it's about connection.
The interesting thing is also, though, it cuts both ways. Sometimes, you're with filmmaking. One of the things I love about it, documentaries, is that it's a very postmodern. You're having a conversation with your future audience as you're filming, and that they're going to be watching the film, the story of the film, but also the story of your presence. They're going to be asking questions about, well, why didn't you, put down the camera at this moment, or how did it feel for you to be in the room? And you have to navigate those waters using basic, non-cinematic, common sense, matters of the heart, logic. And so, so like the nosiness can be too much a lot of the time. I think like one of my favorite moments in any film is in Encounters at the End of the World. Werner Herzog is asking somebody, well, tell me the story of how you came down here to Antarctica. And the guy starts to tremble, and he stammers, and he can't answer. And you hear Werner say, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to say, that's enough. And it's so much more powerful than if he had, as you say, Tom, zoomed in and waited for the teardrop to fall or whatever. And it's such a human moment, and it's so ennobling to the audience and everybody else. And I learned so much from that scene, and I always look for an opportunity to tell my audience, this is the moment where I actually did put down the camera.
Anakin, what was your experience on this film?
Well, the situations were a little bit different because I wasn't kind of following people close up mostly. It was a lot of interviews, and I was in particularly interviewing people in powerful positions on very, very complex topics where I needed to get very specific things out of them. And so in order to do a really a revealing in-depth interview, you have to have so much knowledge, much more than the actual questions that you have. And what I found, it's mostly men in powerful positions. And what I found is that because I'm a woman, and maybe they understand me as a younger woman or something, they always underestimate, because they think that I'm just a young woman, I'm not dangerous. So it's very good so I learned how to build an interview, first start with very simple questions so that it's very, very basic, and then you just get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and maybe they start to understand during the interview that, okay, and then they try to explain things, but then I know how to, react to that. So it was more, that was more my situations, and often it was, to know the questions, how to drive it deeper, but then also not to ask, so that they start on their own to rationalize things, and that's when you kind of get actually more the meat, when you actually just let them talk without knowing what you actually know.
So that film is Cause of Death Unknown, playing on Saturday at noon, so you can see Anakin grilling these pharmaceutical men.
We were a small crew. On many shoots, it was just Anakin and I, maybe a cinematographer as well. And I did sound. And on a lot of these interviews, especially with some of these powerful people she talked about, it was very hard for me to not just want to either hit them with the microphone or start screaming. Anakin was doing a fantastic job, but I was getting so angry at some of the things these people were saying. And then there was we did one shoot with a former FDA employee who's now a whistleblower, and it was very emotional, and it was really hard to just, to see how I mean, Anakin was doing a very good job with him, but it was just sitting there holding the microphone. I was just like, my God, you can see how hard it was for him to sort of tell the story and everything that he experienced. So, yeah. I mean, it was the first time for me to be in a position like that, so it was a tremendous learning experience. But
yeah, because also when you deal with whistleblowers, they have a lot at stake. You know, they really risk. And in this case, this guy was a FDA whistleblower, and he worked at the FDA for 10, 15 years, and he had tried to notify Congress many times on very important topics on drug safety, and he was never heard. He also received like really threats against his family, his children. So that's also the thing when you deal with people who are important sources, that you have their life in your hand, and they're really trusting you with this really vitally important information. And then of course you can't go and give the person a hug when they start to cry, because they realize that the FDA sat on information for 10 years that they knew that people were going to die from this medication, but for very complex web of reasons that was not revealed to the public. So yeah.
One thing I just wanted to mention, which is really nice, is that I think, and I don't know if anyone and any of us have said it, but I think we all feel it, is that we are trying to be flies on the wall. We're not trying to, obviously, like, cause unknown, like, there's certain truths that they're trying to get at, that they want the subjects to say, opposed to you having to say it in VO or in text on screen, et cetera. But I think everyone was willing to sort of go along for the ride and see, like, where is this gonna go? I don't know if that's happening as much, like, in other mediums. I know, like, I do make a distinction, and maybe it's semantics, between, like, documentary and, like, reality. Just I think that, like, reality television, they're producing something, they're trying to, orchestrate conflict or drama for drama's sake, not because it's necessarily was heading in that direction and they're following it. And I think that's something really nice about all these films, is that we're, along for the ride. We are trying to be on, fly on the wall. We're not trying to dictate and navigate where this is gonna go. We want to give these people a chance to sort of tell their stories, for us as filmmakers to let people, the audience, know these subjects in a way that maybe they didn't know them before. And it's refreshing, because I don't know that that's, like Werner Herzog's doing that, but he can do that, he has been doing that. And so it's great that we emulate those moments and try for those own moments in our films, but sometimes in certain company, you're not hearing that. They go into a project with a preconceived notion, and then they're not learning anything. And so, just sort of in terms of like the nosy and getting people to talk, again, it's not like we're fishing for anything. You just want to give them a chance to speak. What would they say if no one was watching? What would they say in their private moments that maybe they'll tell, someone close to them, but not necessarily, a small army of people with cameras and recording equipment.
Let's open this up to the audience. If you have any questions about the craft or business of documentary filmmaking, or if there's something you want to confess to Anna, now's your time. Here's a question up here. Bring the microphone to you.
First of all, thank you to every one of you for your obsessions and for all the sacrifices you have to make to bring these stories. And it really does build community, like you're saying, Jonathan, because once we understand what other people go to, other people in other countries or in different situations, we can be more proactive and more inclusive. Yeah. But I had a question for you. First of all, I thought, okay, you got this day job with reality TV that's so contrived, and then your other job is the opposite.
Yeah, I've kept my hands clean on the day job. I do the graphics for the shows. I don't really make the shows. If the Property Brothers and all the commercials for the shows, I make those things.
You make us want to see those shows.
Yes, I sucker you into it. In the back room, I'm making these little gritty little documentaries. That I love it. I love that job, but that's what pays the bills and allows me to go make these things. Because it's documentary film, not a lot of dough usually, so I have the day job. Yeah.
Question right here.
Thank you for the panel. Now I've kind of changed the movies I want to see left in this week, but I wanted to say about the Grateful Dead movie, and I think you might have understated really what the movie is about, because I was not a Deadhead. I mean, maybe part of me wanted to be, but it was really a much deeper movie, I thought. And fortunately, there was a review in the book, I think, that said someone came they were going to give it 15 minutes, and they stayed. And I had put it down on my schedule. I thought, oh, good, I'll give it 15 minutes. And I thought it was a really gripping series of personal stories about these people.
Thanks.
And I ended up going out and then ordering some of the music, which I didn't have. So I think really it was a true documentary. And I just want to say, I've already put down the other documentaries now that I have to see now that I've heard from the filmmakers. But for the one I did see, you know, I thought it was really not just some deadhead movie.
Thanks.
I just,
Well, you should be my publicist. Thank you. No, thanks for saying. I really appreciate you saying that, and I have been gratified to see that a lot of deadheads are pissed off about the movie. I'm a deadhead, you know, but so that's been that's been gratifying. But then also, yeah, I mean, some of the reviews have been. One review said, like, I still hate the music, you know, and I think all of us one of the things that's unfortunate about this medium is that, you know, people apply a standard that they don't for other films. So, like, you know, they'll say, well, you know, I'm not interested in that in that movie because I'm not a food person. You wouldn't say that about a narrative film. You wouldn't say, you know, I'm not interested in war. I'm not a soldier, so I'm not going to go see that war movie or whatever, right? But people think if you don't like the band, you're not going to like the rock and roll movie or whatever. It's the films when they succeed, they're about something bigger, you know, than just the subject matter. So thanks.
We got a question over here.
Yeah, two-part question for Anakin because the second one might go away. Did you do Big Farm in both the U.S. and Europe?
Yes.
Okay,
So it starts in Norway, and then I'm led to the U.S. But it's you know, it's a global industry, so I'm looking at both how they work in the EU and the U.S.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, any difference, because, you know, knowing that there's so many products, for example, that have been banned in Europe and not here yet, is there any difference in the FDAs in Europe versus here, and what's covered up, and just what you found between the countries?
No, it's actually not much difference, and it's very interesting to hear often in the U.S. that you say that, oh yeah, because this is banned in Europe, but some drugs are approved in the U.S. that aren't approved in the EU, and vice versa. And many of the psychiatric medications, actually, the EU was much easier on approving them. So both systems work essentially in the same way.
All right. There's our next question right here.
Hi, this is for Anakin and Andrew. I saw the movie yesterday, as you know. It was very good. In the Q&A after the film, Mr. Burleson was talking about taking on powerful companies like pharmaceutical companies. And they obviously didn't want you to put out this message. And I was wondering, did you have to spend quite a bit of your budget on lawyers for advice and that kind of stuff?
Our lawyer in New York is the same lawyer who did the Snowden doc. So I'm like, okay, this guy probably knows what he's doing. And he went through the film, and they issued this like 28-page letter telling us, you know, this could be a problem, this could be a problem. But there was nothing that, he said they may kill you, of course, but yeah, if you read about either of us committing suicide, no.
We should make a documentary about it. We should definitely make a documentary about if you end up dead. Copy that.
So no, I mean, so far we've been lucky. I mean, we are insured, of course, just in case. But yeah, I mean, it was an expense, of course, to have all that material checked. And the insurance was extremely expensive. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Question here on the...
Some of you on the left do both turnarounds and quick changes. On the other hand, to my right, a lot of people are working for 10 years on a subject. How do you make ends meet during the rest of the year while you're not working on it, or how does that work?
Live in Berlin. Very cheap.
I work an academic job, so I'm teaching at a university in New Jersey, and I think the reality is a lot of like the brunt falls. I have two little kids that were born into the film, and so it's definitely been hard, on the family to do this, but it's it takes sacrifice to do things that you really believe in. So yeah.
I try to do commercials, and it's pretty fun. I haven't really been successful, and it's funny because I've been up here with my 8-year-old daughter, and I've been involved in this elaborate pitch for a Starbucks commercial, which I didn't get, which seems to be the case. I do a lot of trying to pitch for commercials, and she's been watching me do this. And she says, "But I thought you said ads were bogus, and commercials are crap." And I've had to have this whole sort of parental moment with her. Well, sometimes you have to do things that you think are dead wrong. Go figure.
Where's my microphone? Back there?
Yes. I want to say a big thank you to you, Tom, the best moderator I have ever seen in any panel.
Really good.
We always try to see as many documentaries at the festival as we possibly can because the likelihood that they will come to Metro Detroit are very slim. So we see the docs, and we always try to see the documentary panel, but I have never seen a panel moderator so well prepared as you.
Okay,
Thanks,
well,
Tom.
Thank you, Mom. Right here in the hat.
It's a wonderful, thoughtful discussion. Appreciate it very much. But assuming you can't get to Tribeca or Sundance or even to Traverse City as often as any of us might like, I didn't hear any discussion about distribution or how many of these films might be available for us to see.
Can we just go down the line and talk about where your films are headed?
Sure, yeah. November 3rd, my movie's going to do a theatrical run in New York and LA. And then in December, it'll be out everywhere else. iTunes, VOD, all of those. And then in January, Hulu is going to have it on their platform for SVOD.
Yeah, we just got a distributor as well. We are having a theatrical premiere on October 13th, we believe. That's going to be running in the top 10 markets. I don't think Detroit is in the top 10 markets, but it's going to be playing all over the country. And then Starz is picking it up in March, so that's going to be a pay-per-view situation as well. But also the October 13th, you can buy it on iTunes as well. So it's going to be available to everyone in the country to, if you will pay for it, you can watch it.
Actually, the other thing that our distributor made a point of it is after the few screenings that we've had, a lot of community organizations, schools, et cetera, wanted to do screenings. So they've made a point that they will make it available for private screenings if they want to do it for schools, or if a food bank wants to do it, or if a composting team wants to do it, or so that's something that if you're interested, I'm sure if you reach out to them, it's possible you could do it at Detroit. Or even in Traverse City. I mean, it'd be amazing if it played at the State Theater. So who knows, maybe at the end of the year.
Yeah, so next year we'll broadcast on PBS with American Documentary POV. And then hopefully after that, some sort
People
of...
love free stuff.
I know, free. Yeah, totally. It's awesome. Yeah, and then after that, hopefully some sort of Netflix, Hulu, Amazon sort of thing. But yeah, us too, we're really interested in doing an outreach impact campaign and bringing the film into communities, finding partner organizations. So Detroit, there's a lot of similarities between Detroit and North Philadelphia. And if any of you guys has connections to organizations that we could offer the film as a gift to help support the good work that they're doing, that's really what this is all about.
My film's going to be on Amazon, but I think also one of the problems with this thing is that nobody knows how to find maybe like the films that aren't up here on this panel. And I know that Tom, you're involved in curating, and maybe after we're done, you can talk a little bit about your podcast and some of the other things you do with Sundance and stuff, so that people can tune in year round and find out films that they may not hear about at a film festival.
Our screening yesterday at Traverse City was our first U.S. screening, so we're just sort of getting started here in the States. So we haven't really solidified any plans yet, but given the topic, we really want to work with mental health organizations, nursing schools, universities, things like that, to see the film as well. So if you follow us on Facebook, Facebook Cause of Death Unknown, we'll obviously update with status information. So.
And picking up on what Amir said, I do have this podcast called Pure Nonfiction. I've interviewed over 50 filmmakers there, where you can hear those interviews for free on iTunes or on purenonfiction.net. And my wife and I also do a segment for public radio called Documentary of the Week for New York's public radio station, WNYC. But it's available as a podcast. If you on the Apple Podcast app, you just look up Documentary of the Week, and we have over 100. We've been doing it for a couple of years now. There's over 100. There's 90-second recommendations. So when you're looking for something good and sitting in front of Netflix or whatever and not sure what to watch, you can skim through Documentary of the Week and hear some recommendations. Those of you who are in the Detroit area, on October 7th, I will be at the Detroit Institute of Arts. It's the place where I got my film education. And for my birthday on October 7th, I'm doing an event called Documentary All-Stars. We'll have several documentary filmmakers there, including Barbara Koppel, the two-time Academy Award winner, Steve James, who made Hoop Dreams, Nelson George, who recently made The Ballerina's Tale, and some other documentary filmmakers showing clips, having conversations. It's only going to happen in Detroit. It's only going to happen on October 7th. This is the first time I'm saying this in public. Tickets aren't on sale yet, but circle your calendar for October 7th. All right, who's got a question? Where's the microphone?
Great panel. I think that I saw Quest in Durham at the Full Frame and thought it was wonderful. I'm just curious about various film festivals. I know I was under the impression that Full Frame was the most prestigious, part for documentaries, partly because it's only for documentaries. But I wondered if you could compare some of the different. Tom put a plug in for the NYC one, but I just wonder if you had a film that you knew could originate anywhere, where would you pick and how would you compare the different film festivals that might help us decide where to go to see some of these films?
I could probably open this up to. This is my first film, so I'm just learning, right now. It's probably really debatable. I think there's like two kind of sides. Like one is like, are you taking the film to festival as a market because you want to sell the film? Then you're talking about like a Sundance, Cannes, Berlin, sort of thing. But for me, I've been really gratified by just these like community. Like Full Frame was amazing. Traverse City has been amazing. The community coming out, just getting to meet people. We had a great experience at True False, which is Columbia, Missouri. It has a very similar vibe to what's going on here, and so. But I think that you have to kind of break it up between those two sides of like, marketing your film versus just connecting to people and meeting people and hanging out, which this has been great. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that, though.
But yeah, I think the community thing is a big one. The ones where you can tell people are coming out because they appreciate that you're there and took the time to come out and show your movie. Like Cleveland has a great one. Napa Valley has a great one. And these are places that don't usually get to see these movies and meet us. They'd love to come out. And as the people that are making these movies, when you're on the circuit, it sounds like it's a good time, like you're having parties and drinks all the time, but it's exhausting, and it is weekend after week. You don't know where you're going to be next. And we talk to each other, and when we ask about a film festival, they always say, did they pick you up at the airport? Did they give you a ride? Because the ones that don't do that, you remember that, because you don't know where you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to be doing. So the ones like this that really help you and make it easy are the ones we all want to go to. Like, this is a great one, because I have a ride everywhere I want to go, and they tell me where to be, and I show up. So
it says so much about how many volunteers are here. Like everyone's wearing a T-shirt. I think as many people who are as to come to see the movie, and that's so awesome. They really care, and this speaks loudly about the community.
Definitely.
And what you guys care about. So it's great. So thank you.
You really, and I'm not just saying this because we're here, but this festival is fantastic because. As has been said, the community is all here. The focus is on people seeing films and not on industry. And we have been picked up at the airport. Shout out to Bryn, who took me to Sleeping Bear Dunes, my driver over there. Say hello, Bryn. You don't get that. The volunteers here, to get a day trip out of the festival and to meet people the way we have, that doesn't happen anywhere else. Full Frame and True False and Napa are, I've never been to Cleveland, but are runners up. But this, you should just spend time here every year. It's great.
It's really special.
Amir, are you going to take your daughter to Snow White tonight?
She said no. But I did take her to Daniel Blake, which I'll never hear the end of. She was deeply traumatized. So, yeah.
All right. We'll take a couple more questions, and then we'll start wrapping up.
I just wondered how the two that are here got together. started filming together?
Oh, yeah. So Anna and I have known each other for many, many years, and I am very happy to say that we were friends before we started working together, and I think that says
And
a
we're
lot.
friends still.
Yeah, and we're still
Right?
friends. Everyone's like, "You guys still friends?" We're like, "Yeah, we love each other." And I think that's really important, actually, aspect of filmmaking. It's you are, away from your loved ones. You're going all over, and sometimes to very dangerous and stressful situations. And if you can't be with people and have a drink at the end of the day or a meal and just talk and vent and laugh, it's kind of almost not worth it. So we're very lucky to have been able to work together and work with such a amazing crew that I consider some of my best friends in the world. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like, we worked together, we worked in the office together, and then they put us on one episode, and then Nari had a kid, so she was kind of out of the field for a while, and then this project came up, and we worked together, and again, we were careful, and I don't know if everyone else feels the same way, but, like, of who we want, we knew we were going to have a lot of shoots and an intense kind of 6 months of production, so we were like, okay, who do we want that's going to help us execute, this vision or what we wanted for the project? And it's like, who do we want to spend, a lot of time with? Because I do think it's like, as creative people, I joke as a producer, if it's for my DP, it's like, I know that they need to be fed, watered, talk to their wife, listen to the Patriots game on the radio if they need to, whatever it is, because like most people are, when they're happy, if they're creative, they do better work. There's definitely an argument for when you're miserable doing, suffering for your art.
Really
but-
good stuff comes out.
Yeah, but that's, that's not sustainable. So yeah, it was actually really nice to be able to have a friend about it. And I think Nari and I would go, we'd eat breakfast together, we'd have a drink afterwards, we'd, have sidebar and talk about stuff. And it was nice because it's like we at times do share a brain, but we also have pretty different sensibilities. We literally, in our office, they had like desks, and there was a really small room and the desks were too big, so basically just put the desks together, so like Nari's on one side and I was on the other side. So we literally sat facing each other for like 3 months. And it was funny because we were like, okay, like what do we want this film to be? And Nari's like, I want to make people cry. And I was like, oh, I want to make people laugh. But it was nice to have that sort of dichotomy. Do you know what I mean? Like every time we're looking at things, we would be able to look at it from different perspectives and then kind of talk about it. And I think, be like, oh, what's the better idea? Or like, have a tiebreaker. It wasn't just like one person or the other person. I think it was really collaborative. And that's something I think that we've been lucky to have with, again, these other people, is that there's a lot of super talented people out there, whether it's an editor or DP, an audio person, sound design, colorist. But if you can't get everyone to work together, then I don't know. It's no fun, and like I don't think the product is going to be as special as it can be.
All right, we'll take one more question. Who's got the best one? Or who's got the microphone? All right.
I was wondering what ratio or percentage of your most recent documentary was the story for it. How much did you start out knowing what story you were going to tell, and how much did you find out like during editing or during the filmmaking process?
I would say, mine, I knew Gilbert Gottfried had a professional story, his personal story. I knew nothing. First day of shooting, I found out he had a sister that he visited every day. 2 sisters, actually. Had no idea. I knew almost nothing about his personal life, and just discovered that whole thing along the way.
I think we were in a slightly different boat because we did a lot of research. Ours is very subject-based, so we kind of knew that we were going to involve chefs and we wanted to involve non-chefs, and we had a game plan. But again, what's so inspiring is how much there was. We could have made 4 movies. There's so many amazing stories out there. So I think for us, it was kind of, we had a general game plan, and then the hardest part was kind of like, we can only fit so much into one movie. So we really had to kind of, let go of some of these other stories that we thought we wanted. But yeah, I guess we had a bit more of a game plan. But
Well, I think that's the irony is you go out with a plan. It's like, you have the shoot schedule, your call sheet. You're like, okay, this day 1, we're going to do this. Day 2, you're going to do this. And then you go shoot the scene, and like nothing happens the way it is. One of our most important interviews was with Chef Dan Barber. He was impossible to schedule time with. And so the only time that we could do it was like the morning after the election. And so like everyone woke up and like they're like,
that was a hard day.
Happening? I'm like, they're like, everyone's super depressed. We're like all sitting in a minivan going up to his restaurant, and just like, our sound guy is telling us like what countries we can go live in as expats. And so it was one of those things where like it seemed like a really like not an ideal time to get like a super in-depth interview, and it was actually really nice because it's like, again, you have your list of questions, and then of course there's a lot of extra mood that was from that moment, and he's Dan is like a super cerebral person, and one of the things is that like when we talk to him like without the cameras rolling, he's actually really charismatic, he's like really energetic. You don't always see that, and so it's like, this is what we're trying for in the interview, and again, you don't know that that's going to happen, and sometimes when you turn the camera on, good things happen better than you could have hoped for. And I think that was, at least for us, it's like we'll plan, we'll plan and get a B, a grade in terms of a B, and then sometimes it works out that you get the A, and other times you take like, a C+. So I think it's just that surprise that you have to be willing to sort of go with it.
Yeah, I think for me it started off with a relationship, a friendship. I knew their sort of daily routines. I knew they were this really amazing family that I connected to. But in terms of what actually happens, in terms of like the really hard things, but also the incredibly beautiful things that happened over the years, never could have anticipated that. I think for this film, which is a product of the relationship and then just patience and time spent.
I think what Nari and Anna said about being with a group of friends and improvising. It's really one of the joys of life, and that's what I've been able to do with all my films, is that you surround yourself with people whose opinions matter to you, and then you bounce ideas. You come into it with ideas about what it should be, and then you try and be very open to being wrong about it, and then you kind of move these ideas around your cadre or your coterie, and the best idea usually, hopefully, wins. And so the collaboration in documentary filmmaking and the improvisation are two of the most special qualities of the process.
Okay, to the question of what I knew in the start, I knew nothing. All I knew was that my sister had died, and I didn't know the cost. So I had no idea that it was going to be about the pharmaceutical industry at all. So, and I think that's also what often happens in documentaries, that yeah, the reality is always, what's that saying? Reality is surpassed.
Truth is stranger than fiction?
Yeah.
And more beautiful, and compelling, and emotional.
Yeah, I mean, we had many plans, we had many ideas, but of course, like I said, lots of doors slammed in our faces, people changing at the last minute, waiting for someone to show up on an interview who doesn't show. But it was an adventure. It was a great adventure, actually.
Did you put the fact that it was that day into the films?
No, I mean, actually, Dan really brought it. We were all we were like, what's happening right now? Like, what are we doing here? But he actually is so focused because he has that kind of, ability, and he just really brought it. And it all actually brought our spirits up. And we're like, wow, actually, what we're doing here today is going to have an impact on our society in a good way. Because we all felt so helpless. And we're like, oh, my God, we're so distraught. And then after the interview, we're like, wow, that was a great, uplifting little, speech he gave. It was, I don't know, it was, for me, that was the best takeaway, was like, in the face of, things that you feel like you don't have control in, I think what we all do here is to lend a voice and tell a story that can change the world.
I mean, the one thing that's interesting is that like Nari and I purposefully didn't include ourselves really in the film because we just felt like we wanted the focus to be on everyone else. And like you're right, and if we had been part of the narrative, then maybe it would have been important to know that it was the day after the election, and our president-elect at that point was Donald Trump. But because the interview was able to stand on its own, it almost didn't matter. It was sort of a catalyst for the crew, though, because basically we had this interview, and I think it gave people purpose. It's like, okay, now I have to go do my job for 3 hours. We'll light, we'll do all this, we'll prepare questions. And I remember afterwards, I was like, you guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make this film. We're either going to get thrown in jail as like political dissidents, or we're going to we're going to reduce climate change and feed more people and like protect the rainforest and line the pockets of innovative entrepreneurs. Like that's going to make America great, which is again not words you ever imagined to hear coming out of your mouth. But it actually really gave us focus, I think, and just in terms of we've only screened this a few times, and I think that's one of the things that's really been exciting about this is the first time we've actually answered any questions about the actual filmmaking process. People are like, excuse me, where does my food waste go? Like, how do I get my garbage disposal people to start composting? Or, how much money does it cost to like set up an anaerobic digester? And it's like, I'm not really, we'll get back to you on that. But it's nice that when the film is, do you know what I mean? It's people are
About the
listening.
subject,
yeah,
yeah.
they're asking us questions about what they can do, which again is
That was our goal.
Yeah.
That was our goal from
I mean,
the
it's-
beginning, to have as many people watch this. And when you go to the garbage can, at least if you're still throwing away food, you're gonna feel a little guilty about it. We're gonna shame you into stop throwing away food. No, we joke about it, but it's kind of something you can't unknow. So, that was the goal. And I think it was a very sad day, but it ended up okay.
So I want to remind you, when you can see these films, Quest is playing at noon today. Long Strange Trip, Amir's film about the Grateful Dead, is playing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so no excuses. Wasted, Anna and Nari's film, is playing today at 3 o'clock with Mario Batali there. Neil's film Gilbert is playing today at 6 and Friday at noon. And Cause of Death Unknown, excuse me, has one more screening on Saturday at noon. If you want a free Pure Nonfiction button, come on up here and see me. I want to thank the festival for making this possible. I want to thank all of you, and thanks especially to our filmmakers.
Thank you, Tom.